The conference room felt like a courtroom. Marcus Webb stood at the head of the polished oak table, his hands trembling slightly as 20 pairs of eyes bore into him. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with a harsh, clinical hum that made everything feel sterile and unforgiving. His supervisor, Janet Holloway, sat at the far end with her arms crossed, her expression carved from stone. "Mr. Webb," she said, her voice cutting through the heavy silence like a blade. "We've reviewed the client complaint. The Grantham account, our largest contract, is threatening to pull out entirely because of alleged negligence on your part." Marcus felt his stomach drop. The Grantham account, $6 million, the backbone of the entire division. "Janet, I can explain," he started, but she raised a hand. "We've been more than patient with your personal circumstances," she continued, glancing at a folder in front of her. "Single father, custody battles, late arrivals, early departures. But this?" She tapped the folder with one manicured nail. "This is a liability we can't afford." Around the table, colleagues who'd smiled at him just yesterday now looked away. Marcus recognized the atmosphere. This wasn't a meeting. It was an execution. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Probably his daughter's school again, but he didn't dare reach for it. His throat tightened. 7 years with this company. 7 years of 60-hour weeks, of missing ballet recitals and parent-teacher conferences, of sacrificing everything to prove he could do this job and be a good father. And now it was crumbling. Just as Janet opened her mouth to continue, the conference room door swung open. A man Marcus had never seen before stepped inside, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with an air of authority that seemed to shift the very oxygen in the room. But before we get to that moment, let's go back to where everything truly began, to a rainy Tuesday evening, 24 hours earlier, when a simple act of kindness set in motion a chain of events that would save everything Marcus held dear. Marcus Webb had learned long ago that life doesn't prepare you for the moments that define you. It just throws them at you and expects you to catch them. At 34, he looked older. The lines around his eyes told stories of sleepless nights and endless worry. His brown hair, once thick and carefully styled, now showed premature gray at the temples. He'd stopped caring about that around the same time his ex-wife, Angela, had walked out 2 years ago, leaving behind divorce papers and a 7-year-old daughter who still asked when Mommy was coming home. Lily. Everything came back to Lily. She was the reason Marcus dragged himself out of bed at 5:30 every morning. The reason he worked through lunch, stayed late at the office, and still somehow made it to her school by 3:15 for pickup. The reason he'd learned to braid hair from YouTube videos at midnight, to cook macaroni and cheese in 7 different ways, and to explain why sometimes grown-ups cry too. Their apartment in suburban Philadelphia wasn't much, a 2-bedroom walk-up in a building that had seen better decades. But Marcus had made it home. Lily's drawings covered the refrigerator like wallpaper. Her backpack hung by the door next to his briefcase. A constant reminder of the delicate balance he maintained every single day. He worked as a senior account manager at Whitmore & Associates, a mid-sized consulting firm downtown. The job paid well enough to cover rent, groceries, and Lily's after-school program, but barely. There was no room for error, no savings cushion, no safety net. And lately, the tightrope had been getting thinner. His ex-wife had resurfaced 3 months ago with a new lawyer and renewed interest in custody. Not out of love for Lily, Marcus suspected, but because her new husband had money and wanted to play happy family. The legal fees were drowning him. He'd started coming in early, leaving late, trying to prove his worth to the company, to show he was indispensable. But parenthood doesn't care about your career ambitions. Last month, he'd missed a client meeting because Lily had fallen off the monkey bars and needed stitches. 2 weeks ago, he'd left work at noon when she spiked a fever of 103. Yesterday, he'd been written up for being 20 minutes late. The school bus had broken down, and he'd had to drive her himself. His colleagues, most of them childless or with stay-at-home spouses, didn't understand. They saw his absences as lack of commitment. His supervisor, Janet, had started making pointed comments about dedication and priorities. But Marcus knew his priorities. Every night, when he tucked Lily into bed and she wrapped her small arms around his neck and whispered, "You're the best daddy in the whole world," he knew exactly what mattered. He just wished the rest of the world understood that being a good father and a good employee shouldn't have to be mutually exclusive. That rainy Tuesday evening, driving home through the darkening streets of Philadelphia, Marcus had no idea that a single choice, one small act of human decency, was about to prove that kindness, not ambition, was the currency that truly mattered. The rain came down in sheets, turning the streets into rivers of gray. Marcus was already running late. He'd promised Lily they'd stop for ice cream after picking her up from Mrs. Chen's house, her after-school babysitter, and the clock on his dashboard read 6:47 p.m. His daughter would be waiting, probably pressed against the window, watching for his headlights. That's when he saw him. An elderly man, maybe 70 or older, shuffling along the sidewalk near Broad Street. No umbrella, no raincoat, just a thin cardigan that clung to his shoulders like wet paper. His white hair was plastered to his scalp, and he moved with the careful, uncertain steps of someone whose body had begun betraying him. Marcus's first instinct was to keep driving. He was late. Lily was waiting. The windshield wipers could barely keep up with the downpour, but something made him slow down. Maybe it was the way the old man stumbled slightly at the curb. Maybe it was remembering his own father, who died of a heart attack when Marcus was 19. Too young. Too sudden. Maybe it was just that stubborn part of him that couldn't drive past someone in need. He pulled over, hazard lights blinking. "Sir?" Marcus called out, jogging around the car with his jacket held overhead. "Sir, are you okay?" The old man looked up, water streaming down his weathered face. His eyes, a striking pale blue, held a sharpness that seemed at odds with his frail appearance. "Just trying to get home," the man said, his voice barely audible over the drumming rain. "My car broke down about a mile back." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Get in. I'll take you wherever you need to go." The old man studied him for a long moment, as if measuring something invisible. Then he nodded. Neither of them knew it yet, but that moment would change everything. The next morning started like a warning shot. Marcus's alarm didn't go off. His phone had died during the night because he'd forgotten to plug it in. He woke to Lily shaking his shoulder at 7:15, already dressed in mismatched socks and yesterday's shirt because he hadn't done laundry. "Daddy, we're late," she whispered, her eyes wide with worry that no 7-year-old should have to carry. They were out the door in 12 minutes, no breakfast, no proper goodbye. Marcus's tie hung loose around his neck as he drove through morning traffic that seemed deliberately designed to torture him. A fender bender on the expressway added 20 minutes. Construction on Market Street added another 15. He pulled into the Whitmore and Associates parking garage at 9:47 a.m. Janet was waiting by his cubicle. "My office, now." The conversation lasted 4 minutes but felt like hours. Words like unacceptable, pattern of behavior, and final warning echoed off the sterile walls. She handed him a formal written reprimand and told him the executive team was monitoring his performance closely. "One more incident, Marcus, and we'll have to reconsider your position here." He returned to his desk with trembling hands and found 17 urgent emails from the Grantham account. Their primary contact, David Grantham himself, had apparently been trying to reach Marcus since yesterday afternoon about a proposal deadline. A deadline Marcus had on his calendar for Friday, but Grantham insisted had been moved to yesterday. Marcus's stomach turned to ice as he searched his emails. There it was, buried in a thread from 2 weeks ago, a single line mentioning the date change. He'd missed it. In the chaos of custody hearings and sick days and struggling to hold everything together, he'd simply missed it. He called Grantham immediately. The conversation was brief and brutal. "I don't care about your excuses, Webb. We're considering other firms." That afternoon, Marcus's car wouldn't start. The battery was dead. He'd left the headlights on in his rush that morning. The tow would cost $150 he didn't have. He called a rideshare to pick up Lily, watching his checking account balance drop into double digits. And that evening, sorting through mail he'd been ignoring for days, he found a letter from Angela's attorney. She was filing for emergency custody. The hearing was in 2 weeks. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, the letter trembling in his hands, and felt something inside him crack. He'd tried so hard. He'd sacrificed everything. And it still wasn't enough. He was failing. At everything. All at once. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dark of his living room after putting Lily to bed, staring at his laptop screen, trying to salvage the Grantham proposal. His eyes burned. His coffee had gone cold hours ago. At 2:30 a.m., he gave up and crawled into bed, knowing tomorrow would be the meeting where they decided his fate. And now here he was, standing in that conference room, watching his career disintegrate. The silver-haired man who'd entered moved with quiet authority, his charcoal suit perfectly tailored, his shoes gleaming even under the harsh fluorescent lights. He was the same man Marcus had picked up in the rain yesterday, though now, dry and composed, he looked entirely different. Distinguished. Powerful. Janet stood abruptly, her expression shifting from righteous anger to confusion. "Mr. Whitmore, we weren't expecting—" "I know," the man said simply. "Mr. Whitmore." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Charles Whitmore, the founder of Whitmore and Associates, the man whose name was on the building, on every business card, on every paycheck Marcus had received for 7 years. He'd retired from day-to-day operations 5 years ago, maintaining only an advisory role, appearing maybe once or twice a year for major announcements. Marcus had never actually met him. "I apologize for the interruption," Charles Whitmore continued, his pale blue eyes scanning the room with the practiced ease of someone used to commanding attention. "But I'm afraid I have some relevant information regarding this matter." Janet's face had gone pale. "Sir, this is a personnel issue. The Grantham account—" "I'm aware." Whitmore's voice remained calm, almost gentle, but it carried an edge that silenced her immediately. He turned to Marcus, and something flickered in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or something warmer. "Mr. Webb, I believe we've met." Marcus's throat was too tight to speak. He managed a small nod. "Yesterday evening," Whitmore continued, addressing the room now, "my car broke down in one of the worst rainstorms we've had this season. I'm 72 years old, recovering from pneumonia just 3 weeks ago, and I was stranded on Broad Street in the cold and rain." He paused, letting that sink in. "Mr. Webb stopped his car, offered me his jacket, and drove me 20 minutes out of his way to get me home safely. He was already late picking up his daughter. He didn't ask my name, didn't ask for anything in return." The room had gone completely silent. He simply helped because it was the right thing to do. Whitmore's gaze swept across the table, landing on Janet. "So before we discuss terminating this man's employment, I think we need to have a very different conversation." Charles Whitmore pulled out a chair and sat down, gesturing for Marcus to do the same. Marcus's legs felt like water, but he managed to sink into the seat beside him. "Now," Whitmore said, opening the leather portfolio he'd brought with him. "Let's discuss the Grantham situation properly." He looked directly at Janet. "Ms. Holloway, you mentioned alleged negligence. What exactly are the claims?" Janet cleared her throat, recovering some of her composure. "Mr. Grantham states that Mr. Webb missed a critical deadline for the revised proposal. The deadline was moved up, and Webb failed to deliver, jeopardizing a $6 million contract." "I see." Whitmore turned to Marcus. "And your account?" Marcus's voice came out rough. "I missed an email about the date change. It was my fault. I take full responsibility." Whitmore pulled out his phone, tapping the screen a few times. "That's interesting, because I spoke with David Grantham this morning. We're old friends, actually. Served on the hospital board together for 15 years. He turned the phone around, showing an email chain. According to David, he never moved the deadline. His assistant, however, sent that email without authorization while David was traveling in Europe. The assistant has since been let go for several similar incidents. The room seemed to tilt. Janet's mouth opened, then closed. I was told by Grantham's office—" "You were told incorrectly," Whitmore interrupted, his tone hardening. "Furthermore, I took the liberty of reviewing Mr. Webb's file this morning. 7 years with this company, consistently high performance ratings, client satisfaction scores in the top 10%, multiple commendations." He looked around the table. "And yet, looking at his recent write-ups, I see a troubling pattern." He pulled out a stack of papers from his portfolio. October 15th. Written up for leaving at 3 p.m. to take his daughter to the emergency room. November 2nd. Reprimanded for missing a morning meeting due to a school bus breakdown. November 20th. Formal warning for requesting a personal day to attend a custody hearing. Whitmore's voice grew colder with each word. "Ms. Holloway, are you aware that family medical leave and reasonable accommodations for single parents are not just company policy, but federal law?" Janet's face had drained of all color. "Mr. Whitmore, I was simply trying to maintain standards." "Standards?" Whitmore set the papers down with a sharp tap. "Let me tell you about standards. Yesterday, this man stopped in a dangerous storm to help a stranger. He was already late, already stressed. Already carrying more weight than most people in this room could imagine. And he stopped anyway." His pale blue eyes swept across the silent faces. "That tells me more about his character than any performance metric ever could." He stood, and everyone in the room seemed to shrink slightly. "Here's what's going to happen. The Grantham account is secure. David called me this morning to apologize for the confusion and confirmed he wants to continue working with Marcus specifically. All disciplinary actions against Mr. Webb are rescinded, effective immediately. And Ms. Holloway, you and I will be having a private conversation about leadership, compassion, and what this company actually values." Janet looked as though she might be sick. Whitmore turned to Marcus, and his expression softened. "Mr. Webb, take the rest of the day off. Paid. Spend it with your daughter. You've more than earned it." 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the same parking garage where his car had died, but everything felt different now. The custody hearing had gone better than he'd dared hope. His lawyer, pro bono, arranged quietly through a contact of Charles Whitmore's, had presented a clear picture of Lily's stable, loving home. Angela's petition was denied. Joint custody remained, but Lily's primary residence stayed with Marcus. At work, things had shifted too. Janet had been reassigned to a different division. The new department head, a woman named Patricia Rodriguez, had called Marcus into her office on her first day. "I have a 7-year-old too," she'd said simply. "Sometimes they get sick. Sometimes school calls. We'll figure it out together." The Grantham account had expanded, not contracted. David Grantham himself had insisted on working directly with Marcus, impressed by what he called integrity in action. But the biggest change wasn't professional. It was deeper than that. Marcus had started arriving 10 minutes early on Thursdays to mentor Jeremy, a young analyst going through a difficult divorce. He'd helped coordinate a company-wide initiative for flexible working arrangements for parents. He'd even started a fund, collecting donations to help colleagues facing unexpected hardships. Today, leaving work at exactly 5 p.m., no guilt, no anxiety, Marcus saw an elderly woman struggling with grocery bags near the bus stop. Rain was starting to fall, light and misty. He didn't hesitate. "Ma'am, can I help you with those?" She looked up, startled, then smiled with relief. "Oh, that would be wonderful. I just live 2 blocks down." As Marcus loaded her bags into his trunk, his car finally repaired and running smoothly, he caught his reflection in the window. The lines around his eyes were still there, but they looked different somehow. Less like worry, more like wisdom. He thought of Charles Whitmore, of that rainy night, of how one small choice had cascaded into something so much larger. Kindness wasn't a transaction. It was a ripple. And today, Marcus was grateful to send another one out into the world. That evening, Marcus picked up Lily from school, right on time. She ran to him with a drawing she'd made, 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, labeled "Me and Daddy." He held it like it was made of gold. Sometimes we go through life thinking we're invisible, that our struggles don't matter. That the small choices we make, stopping for a stranger, offering a hand, showing up even when we're exhausted, don't really count for anything in the grand scheme of things. But Marcus learned something profound in those rain-soaked moments on Broad Street. Every act of kindness is a seed planted in soil we may never see bloom. We help not because we expect something in return, but because it's who we choose to be when nobody's keeping score. The world can be hard. It can be unfair. It can grind us down until we wonder if goodness even matters anymore. But it does. It matters in the eyes of a daughter who sees her father choose compassion over convenience. It matters in the heart of an elderly man who remembers what it feels like to be seen. It matters in the workplace that becomes a little more human, a little more understanding. Because one person refused to let cruelty be the standard. Marcus Webb didn't save his job because he was the best employee or because he had the perfect performance record. He saved it because when it mattered most, he chose to be kind. And in the end, that's the currency that never loses its value. That's the investment that always pays forward. That's what makes us truly rich. Not what we accumulate, but what we give away freely. Expecting nothing in return. Because kindness, like rain, falls on everyone. And sometimes, it comes back to water the very ground we stand on. If this story touched your heart, please like and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness always comes back around. Have you ever helped a stranger and had it change your life? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories that remind us what truly matters in life.